Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Goodwin of Key Performance Ideas, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Oracle PBCS Enhancements, New User Interface, and Seamless Data Automations, presented today by Scott Costello. Scott, a CPA and certified Oracle Hyperion Planning, S-Base, and Hyperion Financial Management Consultant, is a recognized leader and frequent speaker at national and virtual events to foster best practices in enterprise performance management and business intelligence. He has more than 16 years of consulting management experience and has guided customers across a variety of industries in their implementation of successful planning, forecast, close, and reporting solutions. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today.
Thank you, Anissa. Thanks for the introduction there. And good afternoon or morning to some. As Anissa said, the point of today's presentation is really to help educate and keep informed both our existing clients as well as anyone who's considering moving to Hyperion's cloud environment. What we like to do is Hyperion at Oracle goes about updating the cloud environment or PBCS on a regular basis. We want to make sure everyone's kind of informed on the new features and things that are available with each release. So this will be a regular practice for us, just so everyone's on the same page and we can showcase some of the functionality before you decide to make any changes in your environment. So I'm going to get right into the agenda here. I know we have a few folks on the phone who aren't existing clients, but are potentially considering PBCS or planning and budgeting cloud service. So for the agenda, it's really to educate existing users on some of the new features, but also introduce PBCS in the beginning for those of you who have not heard or seen of it before. So I'm going to start with that, kind of a quick intro of the Planning Budgeting Cloud Service, or PBCS as I'll refer to it here on out. Then I'll talk about some of the new features and functions. I'll get into a demonstration of these features, and then we'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So just looking at the attendee list, I know we have some existing clients on the phone, and it looks like we have some new folks as well. So appreciate everyone's participation today. So quickly, just to review the PBCS tool and what that really is. You'll often see this as our reference to PBCS. We've kind of taken a three-pronged approach to this technology. Light bulb being our logo for Key Performance Ideas. We've kind of broken it up into three pieces. One is you have this cloud-based PBCS environment, which I'll explain here in a minute. Two, our implementation or consulting practice that I run allows you to get this technology up and running quicker than a traditional on-premise solution. And three, we have a team for managed services, or a smart team that can help with you supplement or complement administrators of the solution. So that three tiers really helps bring this technology together, and I know we have a few folks on the line who take advantage of all three. So I'm going to focus on that first tier, just to make sure everyone understands what PBCS is, and then we'll get into the new features of it. So PBCS, again, is a cloud-based solution. It's one of the first in the EPM technology of Oracle's, or the Hyperion technology of Oracle, that they've moved into the cloud. So for those of you who have heard of Hyperion before, have used Hyperion in the on-premise world, they haven't rewritten the code. It's the same technology that's been around for over a decade now. It's just deployed differently in their cloud environment, and you pay a subscription instead of installing the software on your internal servers. What's nice is that it includes all the infrastructure, the reporting, data management that people are used to. Just quickly, some of the benefits of it. It's the Hyperion brand, it's the Hyperion technology, so you get the world-class solution when it comes to scalable forecasting budgeting technology. There's no CapEx investment because you don't have to buy the servers, you don't have to invest IT. It's generally owned by line of business. You do get the financial reporting that Hyperion is kind of known for, as well as the Microsoft Office integration that is very simple and most people love. But it does come with some of the other features of data integration that's built into it to make that a little more automated. There's also some starter kits and demos and guides all built into it online. There's some built-in diagnostic capabilities. But what's nice about being in the cloud is they have their own failover and disaster recovery, and they back that up on a daily basis for you. What's also really nice is there's no upgrade costs. So, every 3, 4, or 5 years, you're generally doing an upgrade or applying new patches to the environment. You don't have to worry about any of that going forward. With the license, that's all included for you. And just expensing the service actually saves a little bit over capitalizing the cost of the software. So when it comes to things like the Oracle data center, it is pretty flexible. You can pick and choose what day, what time you want to do things like backups and apply patches. When an upgrade comes out, which we're expecting a major upgrade this year, you'll actually be given a 4-month window as to when you want to start that upgrade process. It is a secure data center. It's managed completely by Oracle employees. They have what's called a single tenant, so they're not mixing your data on a server with other clients' data. It's all kind of isolated. Even Oracle itself doesn't have access directly to your data. You have to go through some rigmarole to give them that access, but it's another way that they ensure that things are locked down. Their operations, just a snippet here. This numbers grow all the time, so even this information is a little bit dated, but it is 24/7 operations with all the failover and backup as expected. And as mentioned, it's 100% owned by Oracle. Now, even though PBCS is new to the cloud, the planning technology is new to the cloud, within the past year, Oracle's been in the cloud for a long time. And with all the technology that Oracle has, they have millions of end users using their cloud environment, similar data centers to where this technology is. 12,000 different customers. They're based all over the world, different languages. Currently 19 data centers, but I think even that grows. So it's not new territory for them, just the way that they're modeling the Hyperion part of it is. So that's a little bit on PBCS itself. For those of you new to it, just to give you an idea of kind of what this technology represents. It's basically the same Hyperion technology that's been around for quite some time, deployed in a cloud environment, minimizing some of the costs as well as the implementation fees. But I did want to go through some of the new features specific for those of you who are currently using the cloud, so you can take advantage of this, and those of you who are new to it can see, some of the functionality firsthand. So the real major patch release came. They do patch releases once a month for fixes and things like that. But in December they released some newer functionality, and that's what I wanted to go through. Their December release of the .601 version of this tool. What they did provide was a new user interface. So you can use the one that you're used to. You can go through SmartView, you can go through the web, but they've made a new user interface to really start taking advantage of the mobile capabilities of the technology. And I'll get into that, but they didn't get rid of the old user interface. They still have both, and you can pick and choose which one you want to work through. So this is the 601 environment, and I'll get into showing you that simplified user interface. It also supports a few different browsers than it had in the past too. Because it's mobile, you can now use things like Chrome and Safari. This is kind of a look and feel of the screenshot when we get into it. And for those of you who do have access to it, you can get into this URL already. We'll give you a quick presentation of it. So to access the new URL, it's the same as the old one, except instead of workspace at the end, you'll see you can have Hyperion Planning at the end. You can also access this directly from the workspace. There's a big button that says Simplified Interface. You just click on that, and it'll take you to the same URL. So as mentioned, it does support Google Chrome now. It does also support Safari. So you can use your tablet, you can use your phone, launch those browsers and actually start to see forms and start to interact with the data a little bit. Also includes support for current versions of Firefox as well as Internet Explorer version 10 and 11. I mentioned the Chrome and Apple Safari on iPad. I've used it a few times on my iPad, and it's pretty neat. It's nice to be able to see that you can access things and start punching data in directly through your iPad. Again, that's the URL. So again, what they've done is they've added a lot of the functionality in the traditional interface into the simplified interface, but just kind of a different streamlined look and feel. And the point of this new look and feel is, again, to make mobile devices appear more friendly. So they've really redesigned it so that mobile devices would render appropriately. This is an example of something like a screenshot of a task list, the step-by-step instructions of what users need to do in order to get their forecast or budget in. The data entry screens of the web forms even look a little different. You could do things with different dashboards, and I'll show you a few examples of those. Again, can all be done from your tablet or mobile device. There's also introduced something called a console, and you can do some high-level application management via that. So I can play with the statistics on each of my different plan types or databases. I can even manage some of the dimensions in there, change the evaluation order. I can modify any component of it, any property within those dimensions. You can even import and export the metadata directly in this interface too. So if you want to export your chart of accounts or import an entity structure, you can do a lot of that through this console screen. So this is just a quick view of what it looks like. And this is where you can start to play with some of those statistics. And here's, as I mentioned, you can do some imports and exports directly from the console too, as well as do some of the traditional stuff as maintenance time, refresh the database, et cetera. A really nice new feature that's been added is the ability to schedule jobs. This was something I think a lot of organizations were looking for with the initial release, but now it's available directly in the tool. And I'll show you this hands-on when I get into the application, but the ability to schedule calculations, schedule data movements, import exports, and several other things wasn't an option in the first releases. So now if you have a process that needs to run a calculation on a regular basis, you can schedule that. You can schedule the date and time it's run and the frequency at which it's run too. This is a screen of the job console and how you go about scheduling some of those. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. On the left-hand side, it shows you the available jobs that can be scheduled. Rules are different calculations. You import data or metadata, the metadata being the structures and dimensions. Export of the two. Refresh of the database. Even some of the mapping capabilities are available right here in the tool. You want to move from one database to another. This is how you would do it. You basically set up when you want to run it. You can run now or at a specific time. And then you can go ahead and give that particular job a name and tell it how frequent you want to do it, if it's daily, monthly, weekly, hourly. Another big thing that's been added is the backup and the recovery with this release. In the past, all the data wasn't always backed up as frequently as the rest of the objects. So your dimensions were always backed up every night, but the data itself was not. Now the data gets backed up on a regular basis too, and you have the ability to pull down that information. So the system currently only keeps one version, like last night's information in your backup, but now you can extract that and keep offline in your internal servers or even on your desktop backups at dates and time of the instance through lifecycle management. So snapshots of that data are backed up in the window that you define it within the application. So most organizations are backing their application up in entirety somewhere in the middle of the night. But Oracle recommends, as do we, that putting together a process that says, let me take those artifacts of the data and everything like that, and let me back it up on a more incremental basis. So maybe every week you want to take that information and take it offline into your own environment, or maybe every month grab that snapshot of structures and data and back that up. It just allows you to revert back to older versions if you ever need to. This is a screenshot of lifecycle management and the application tool and all the different artifacts and types of artifacts that you can download and save. So let me get into the application real quick here. As you can see, as I mentioned, it's the same URL that you're used to, except instead of Workspace, you can just go to Hyperion Planning at the end, or you can launch the traditional way and you'll see a button for simplified interface. So a few of the things I did not show is you have the ability to customize the screen. I know this probably looks maybe not the prettiest color, but I wanted to just highlight that I can now change the background, change the colors. You can match it with your company colors. I can even put things like specific names of what I want to call this, or a logo in here, just to personalize it a little bit more. So I've customized this front end screen just a little bit so that you can see some of the capabilities here. But this is the new user interface. So this is a simplified interface that you have an option of interacting with. If I go ahead and I click on some of this, you can see it kind of moves and feels a little bit like you'd expect a mobile device to feel, with the big buttons and the ability to click into any one of those and see information. Some of these capabilities are already available, like the ability to turn a data entry form into a dashboard. But just to give you an idea of what it looks in the new interface, if I take this bar chart as an example, and I'm just going to expand it a little bit, I can now see really more graphical views and a few more options in terms of the types of graphics that I can apply to these forms. When you render this again in a tablet device, it's very easy to kind of interact with it and easier to deploy these types of reports. So this is technically a data form that we're not allowing input into, but it's more just for consumption purposes. As I mentioned, the task list, being able to see all the different tasks, when things are complete, when they're not, that hasn't really changed, except the way that they're displayed changed a little bit. I did want to talk about forms, because they did introduce a new look and feel for the forms as well. So this is a place where, as an end user, I would go ahead and start entering my data. As you can see, they've taken advantage of things like the full screen. I can start to even do things like format my data a little bit more, put bold lines in and not. But you can see, too, that it looks a little bit more like Excel. It's just a very clean interface. I don't have all the little buttons up at the top like I do in the traditional one. I still have all my action items available of what I want to do in terms of the data, add supporting detail, those sorts of things. And the way the data interacts is still the same, too. So, I could just come in and start punching in data the way I'm used to doing it. It puts the yellow color coding and those sorts of things in here as well. And I can change any one of my drop-downs the way I'm used to doing it over the traditional interface. So again, it's really a new UI. It's a new way of being able to interact with the data. It has all the same functionality, but it's just trying to make it a little cleaner and a little simpler to use. And again, these data forms you can deploy. You can pick and choose which ones you want to deploy over mobile devices and which ones you don't. Rules or calculations are all maintained in here as well. when you launch into it, it's the same interface that you're used to being able to go in and change the calculations and those sorts of things. The workflow or the approval process is built into this. The reports from financial reports are all available right here as well. And it's just, again, a linking of all those same reports that you may have built through Financial Reports or Financial Reporting Studio. The console itself is the other area that I mentioned a little bit. It tries to give a little more information on the application. Now, how many tasks do we have? How many rules do we have? Is there a workflow already in place? You can see the different capacity of the different plan types that you might be using. In here, I can actually go in and create a new plan type if I wanted to, right through this interface. And even the dimensions I can play with a little bit. I can create new ones, I can change the evaluation order, or I can do some importing and exporting of these structures into a simplified interface. The job code is the other thing that I showed, or the job scheduling is the other thing that I mentioned earlier, and this is where you would go ahead and create a new job or schedule a job, and you can pick a date and time when you want that scheduled, and you can pick these types of jobs to do. So some of the things that weren't available in previous versions before this December release is I couldn't schedule a calculation to run at a point in time. Now I can. So if you have a process where you're running calculations a few times throughout the day, or if you want to do it as part of the overnight load, you can do that now. The import and export of data, that can all be automated. And things like refreshing the database can be scheduled. So if you change your structure and you want to make sure the database is refreshed on a regular basis, you can build that in too. Define how often you run it, and you can even define end dates. So I won't go through the entire process, but it's just really these 3 steps of scheduling the job and then executing when you want it to run. The other thing that's a part of this, they continue to try to put things around the academy or the explanations of how to complete different processes. So a lot of the training information is online through the workspace and the traditional interface, but this tries to simplify it even more. So how do I go about managing plan types? How do I go about importing or exporting data? And they really simplified the amount of steps that they walk you through in order to get that information out. As you can see, there's several of these. So instead of kind of a long admin guide where you have to sort through or using the online help, they tried to make this academy a little bit easier so that you can get answers to your questions pretty quickly. And then last is the navigator itself. So the navigator is kind of brings you back and allows you to access any of these buttons that we just talked about, as well as some of the other features. So if you just want to go and administer the dimensions or administer the forms, I can do it right from here. Instead of having that panel in the classic view where I have to kind of navigate, I have to kind of know a little bit where I need to go. This basically has all the action items right in one view. The one thing that I didn't get into too much, and is one of the bigger features of this December release, is something called EPM Automate. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this. So traditionally, we would use a tool where we would extract information out of one system, transfer that file with this utility that I've highlighted into Oracle's data center, and then schedule the load of that particular file. With EPM Automate, I can now not just do data loads, but I can do a few other steps as well. So just to go through those a little bit. It is a batch file, so I can use things like a Windows scheduler tool, which comes with basically any Windows environment, to run this utility. So I can schedule it to run at any time using any sort of scheduling tool. But again, the things I can do as a part of the schedule, not through the manual job interface, but as a code that I want to schedule a few different things to run. I can import and export metadata. I can import and export the planning application data. So if I want to, again, save some of that information offline, I'll just load the rest of these here. I can refresh the application, I can run rules, I can even copy data across some of the applications. So they've introduced a few other database types in this release too, referred to as ASO or aggregate storage type databases, that if you're ever experiencing long consolidation times or slow reporting, being able to move to those aggregate storage database or ASO, we find it to be a little bit faster. And you can upload and download the repository. You can even export and import snapshots. So as we mentioned, we recommend that on a weekly basis or daily basis or some incremental level that you back up your application, because Oracle will do it for you nightly, but then the next day, 2 nights ago, data and information is gone. But with this utility, you can schedule to keep those backups, as much as you want. And you have all these other components as well. And as mentioned, you can use Windows Scheduler, so it's a little more of a scripting. So we developed some scripts for helping do things like maintaining 7-day application backups. And we've also developed some scripts around email notifications when things start to error out, or if there's specific operation codes. I just wanted to explain those a little bit more. So these are some of the commands that you can do as a part of this EPM Automate. Just the log in, the log out. I can pass parameters for hiding passwords now, which was not available in the past. Obviously, you can download files, run business rules. You can do the imports as well as exports of metadata and data. So in the environment, as mentioned, you can create variables for different things. Before, you had to kind of hard code in a username and password in some of your batch scripting, but now you can create variables for all these different things, including some of the period keys for when you want that data to load. So if you're loading January data, you can automatically pick that information up. So a typical example of an automation process using EPM Automate for data load, it can do everything where you set the set the environment variables. You can clear out data before you load it. You can go ahead and run the load. You can run an aggregation post-load. You can even get emails, if there is an error on some of the loading procedures. So the error in email handling is not something native to the application. This is something we've built out. But because they've opened up the EPM Automate tool to allow for scripting and batching, we can use some Visual Basic code that we've built to notify people if there are errors with the file. So as mentioned, now we built a little utility that takes some Visual Basic script and says, if there is an error or an issue in the load process, whether it's the operation completed without errors or the incorrect parameters were set, or there's the service is down or the password has expired, we've created an email notifying you specifically that that'll happen or what's occurred. So instead of you trying to do this in kind of a manual process and getting an error code and not really knowing what does that error code mean, instead we've built a procedure so that with the script, when you try to load information and you get one of these errors, as a part of the automated overnight process, it'll send you an email letting you know, hey, everything complete without errors, or guess what, your password's expired because you're past 90 days. Even some things around the EPM copy feature, we can pull whether it's a success or failure. But some of the traditional data load and error handling wasn't available until this EPM Automate became available. And we can even attach logs of what things kicked out or what didn't as a part of that email, just to make the process a little simpler. So again, that's some functionality that we've built internally. And if anyone's interested in learning more about that, we can definitely discuss some of those features. So just to review some of those automations, the data loads and a lot of the administrative tasks that you might want to do on a nightly basis or even a monthly basis, we can now automate that Given that it's open up to batching and scripting with Visual Basic, you have a lot more flexibility of what you can do and what you can pull in from a system. What's nice about this too is it could be on the server or it could just be on your desktop. You could actually run this utility. And then you can schedule things, as mentioned, with any sort of scheduler, but use this task scheduler rather than the scheduling capabilities of data management. There's a task scheduler that makes that a little bit easier. So I wanted to try to keep my part of the presentation to at least a half an hour and give you just some insight into what's new. As you can see, though, Oracle continues to invest in some of the mobile capabilities of this technology. And I think we're just going to see greater and greater push into that simplified interface and more functionality there, so that, again, people can use these cloud-based technologies like they're used to, either from their phone or from their tablet.